Thousands of men took part in the opening of the American West. Cowboys and ranchers, farmers and tradesmen, outlaws and gunmen, they all carved a little piece of history and made it their own. Many were legends in their own time. Many weren't remembered at all. But some deserve the recognition they earned. Men like Lobo don't deserve to be forgotten, for they were there. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
And today we're going to talk about Lobo. No, not that Lobo, but a different Lobo on Speechless, not Genreless, but Speechless. But we'll explain in a second. Hello and welcome to an emergency brief intermission of Speechless. I know we just did a Speechless run a minute ago, but there's a reason for this. Partially because Chris wanted to hear the theme song again, but partially because we thought it was a really appropriate time to talk about a damn near forgotten comic that is really relevant to our current run now, which is the Dell comic of Lobo. I'll go through what little research I've done, and maybe Chris can have some more context. But basically, it was only 2 issues long. It was one issue was in 1965, that was 1966, and it was, as far as we can tell, historically, the first ever black comic book hero. And it's a Western comic, so it makes a lot of sense to talk about it here right after the 70s runs of black-led Westerns that we did. So we thought I'd take a short break, talk about these 2 comics real quick, then go back to the movies we've been going through.
You're so apologetic. I don't know why you're that apologetic. It is our freaking show, man. Like, we could say we do one Genreless, one Speechless back to back. Our listeners, I think, are in it more for us in what we decide to talk about than necessarily the structure that we have. Though we are obsessed with the structure. I do not feel the same need to be as apologetic as you do.
Fair, but we did talk about, hey, we're going to do this other thing, and then we're doing something else instead. So, explain why the episode you expect to download is not the one you're actually listening to right now.
You're overthinking it.
Fine. Screw all y'all. We're doing what we want.
That's right. Because I'm your main man. I could do my Jason Momoa impersonation now, too.
You could.
So, one of the reasons that Lobo spans 2 years of 2 issues is I think the first issue was dropped in December of 65, and then the second issue was dropped in January of 66. So
no, it was dropped in September of 66.
Thank you. In case people are curious, it's because right there, that weird sort of year cusp.
Right. Yeah. So, as I understand it, what happened,
a bit of clarification. We believe Lobo to be the first black hero with their own standalone series. Let's punctuate that specifically.
Fair. Because, brief digression, right around this time, also a black character was added to Teen Titans. I believe he was going by a few different names, but I think Gabriel was the one that ended up kind of being called the most. And it was right around the mid-60s that happens too. But you're right. This is the first black hero with his own solo comic historically that we found.
Yeah. So, God, I'm trying to remember in all the failed attempts at trying to do something right. I think they even had, I don't remember if it was around the 60s or the 70s, but they had a white dude that turned into a black dude was like their thing, which if you've heard me talk about the Watchmen TV series, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Fair.
Or there was like the Legion of Superheroes, I think, had a black character for an issue who had like a sonic power. I think that was right around this time. I'm pulling deep because I haven't read that in like 30 years.
Sure, right. And DC certainly had a contentious relationship internally with black characters during that time period. But I did do a bit of research on this one, and what's actually fascinating is that there's not a lot known about it, partially because Dell Comics they were very much a staple of the 60s, and then they kind of collapsed around the 60s to 70s because they were the last bastion of not exclusively superhero comics in the 60s. They did westerns, they did romance comics, they did other things. Marvel was also doing that, and DC was also doing that, but superheroes were pretty rapidly taking over the majority of the comics they made. Dell still did a wide variety. Also, specifically, they did kids comics, they did cartoon comics, funny animal comics, those kinds of things.
Did they do the Prince Valiant comics?
I actually think they did. It was either Dell or Gold Key. I'm not 100% sure which. Those two do get blurred in my head because they're contemporaries. But
so
yeah,
another side digression. I actually remember owning several Prince Valiant comics and Robin Hood comics around this time.
Oh, really?
I wasn't alive at this time, but I inherited them. So it's
fair. Yeah, I did have, I think, one Gold Key Star Trek comic from the late 60s. Again, grandfather had it and he let me borrow it, and I kind of just ended up having it. It was tattered to hell, and also those comics are notoriously, well, the early Star Trek comics are notoriously bad. But anyway, digressing. There's not a ton I was able to find out about Lobo specifically for a lot of reasons. But what I found is that the writer and the editor of the comic was DJ Arneson, and the artist was Tony Tallarico. Now, like many artist and writer combinations of the time, there are two different stories of how this actually worked out. It's going to sound very Stan Lee, Jack Kirby when I explain the situation. Tallarico says he had the idea for having a black cowboy because he had read a book about, I think it was called Negroes on the Range. And it's like, I want to do a comic about a black cowboy. He approached DJ Arneson, who liked the idea. Arneson then showed it to the Dell editor-in-chief, and she really liked it. So no one in Dell had any concerns about this. Like, yeah, no, this would be awesome. Let's go ahead and do it. Arneson claims that he created the character, not Tallarico, and they also differ on why the comic was canceled. Comics in general, but specifically comics this time period, you made two before the first one was on shelves because you had to be basically a month ahead. And so they did the first two issues. The first issue went out and to distributors. Arneson's claim is that it just didn't sell well. And the only reason why issue 2 happened was because basically it was already done and they needed it to fill a gap in the schedule 9 months later. So they went ahead and printed issue 2 just to fill in a gap in the schedule. Tallarico says that Dell sent the bundles of comics out and they were returned unopened because comic book sellers had found out what the content of the comic was and conspired to return them instead of actually putting them on their shelves.
So if I'm curious where you got your things, because you could have went to Haunted West, because I talk about Lobo and Haunted West. Yeah, there's like a big bit about Lobo in there. Which shows you Eddy worked someone on Haunted West, but he didn't read it. So in case people are curious, I am now going to use that to beat Eddy like a stick for like the next 8 years.
Yes, podcast. I didn't memorize your 800 page book I read 5 years ago, Chris. I'm sorry.
It is 806 pages, my friend. So one of the big things was, like, from my understanding, and this is part of what's in Haunted West, part of not. And to give you an idea, I haven't read Haunted West really myself in like in this level of detail in like 3 years. So
see.
So I'll only beat you with a stick for like 3 years. But they sent it out, and the people in the southern states found out what it was about, and they sent those all back unopened, which impacted the ability of sales and several other things, which means that Lobo was not going to get a real chance to run and make money and become profitable.
Okay.
And my inclination is that is likely more true than the other one is, given even how difficult it is current day to make something that tells a real story of the Old West.
Right. And especially considering, I admit, we on this podcast have frequently said that in the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby divide, we tend to err on the side of Jack Kirby. And so I'm more inclined to go, well, if the artist is saying this is true, this is probably true because writers were often given credit in these comics artists were rarely given credit in these comics. So there's less reason for artists to lie in these circumstances, whereas there's more reason for writers to lie. Yeah, so I was always kind of Talrico's argument is probably true. So, and also given the time period, I mean, this would have been around the same time as Star Trek was fielding these kinds of problems. There was another thing we talked about that in the 60s that kind of, it all blurs together a bit, honestly. Oh, Peanuts. That's what I'm thinking. Peanuts. Schultz had this problem too.
Do you just want to talk about the civil rights movement? Like, we could go there if you like.
Sure, right.
There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Turns out there's a lot of stuff happening in the 60s. But yeah, like the numbers I have was that Dell printed 200,000 issues of the comic, which was fairly typical of a Dell comic. They didn't really have tiers like Detective Comics or Marvel had. They basically just, if it was a comic, they printed 200,000 copies of it, and then they adjusted based on sales. And they only sold about 10 to 15,000 of issue 1.
Which, if they're sending them back to them, that would make sense. Because I think the Southern market was a huge market, too, at the time.
Yes. As I understand it, now we're moving into me reading through the lines of things. But around this time period, a lot of the big markets were obviously kids, but also military personnel were big comic buyers. And that's actually how a lot of American comics ended up going to places like Japan and Europe, and how the comics are influencing the animation and art styles of those areas too, is because American personnel in the 40s, 50s start bringing comics over, even the 60s start bringing comics over, and then leaving them there or whatever because they were disposable. So yeah, I think that the South was a fairly large. Midwest also was a fairly large market. And so I guess probably where more of the 10, 15,000 probably sold was in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Because that's those numbers track with, again, some of the controversies around DC's attempts to sell things in the 70s. Again, now we're talking slightly post civil rights movement. Those numbers started to shift in comics, but now we're deep into the middle of that. The only other thing I want to mention about this is that in 2006, Talarico actually was given the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention's Pioneer Award for Lifetime Achievement because of Lobo. His work was not completely unrecognized, but it is something that only in the early 2000s, when digital comics preservation started becoming a thing, did this stuff start coming out and being more widely circulated and being aware of.
Now, the elephant in the room, Eddie. Sure. As you're a huge DC Comics fan, right, why did DC Comics steal the name Lobo and attach it to a space bounty hunter?
I don't know if there's actually a connection, because Lobo just is wolf. It's really a lone wolf, and both of the characters are very, very different depictions of the lone wolf archetype. So it is entirely possible that there may not be a connection between them. But the fact that it happened after Dell went into administration, because Lobo was created like in the 80s, I want to say, but certainly not in the 60s. It may have been accidents, and they went to trade market and say, oh, look, there's other thing exists, but they're out of business, so it's not a big deal. Or it may have been they were sitting on the name, maybe they acquired it, maybe they owned a piece of Dell, found this name in the list of trademarks they owned, and said, cool, we'll use this for something else entirely. I don't know.
So my biggest shit on pushback on that would be, since Lobo essentially is a biker, and there's been a lot of analogs between cowboys and like modern day bikers being like sort of like their equivalents, even in movies and other TV shows. It is just interesting that they have a bounty hunter who goes out and tracks people on a space motorcycle, named for a black cowboy that would do a little bit of bounty hunting too, from reading the comic. Just interesting.
Entirely fair. There was actually a sequel, a one-issue sequel to this comic, about 5-6 years ago. because, as I understand it, a lot of the Dell stuff is now in public domain. And so there was a company that decided to do remakes. I think it's Indelible. I think was the company because the Dell is in there. So I think they did a bunch of one-shot sequels to Dell comics, and Lobo was one of them. I can't find it anywhere. Probably a very small indie company, but it shows that there has been some interest back into the character recently.
So I know a little bit about that. I'm trying to remember most of it. The thing, well, to like be able to really talk about Lobo in the way that I did in the comics, I had to go and then try to track down Dell people to talk to them about who actually owns the rights to Lobo. It was a super attentive 3 months, Eddie, of trying to find people to find things before I put it into Haunted West.
Oh, damn.
So anyone that's curious, it takes a lot of additional research and legwork to be able to put other ideas and things into your book and to publish them. So you need to ensure that as much of it as humanly possible is in public domain, or that you have permission from people to use things. And in the end, after a whole bunch of things, Lobo is pretty much in public domain. Like, that was as solid of an answer as I got at the end of the day.
Okay.
Because the company went away, there was no one really claiming rights to it, and it was actually bought by a different company. It's a whole bunch of hoo-ha that I will not go into from like my own months of work.
Right. I mean, I will say, long story short, is that if the company is not around to defend the rights, and if another company has not explicitly bought the rights to it, it then goes into a limbo. And after a certain number of years, if the original creators do not reclaim those rights, then they go into public domain.
Which is why those people in 2000 could kickstart whatever their thing was and then make things of Dell.
Right. As a random example, when Paradox Interactive bought the assets for White Wolf, they bought specifically a very long list of assets. I know because I was actually the consultants to make sure all those are tracked. But there were certain things that were not on that list that White Wolf did for a variety of reasons. They were partially owned by other people. There was no interest in them, whatever. So there's a small, tiny bit of very minor things that actually Paradox Interactive doesn't actually own. And those, I went out and contacted the original creators and said, hey, if you want to reclaim these rights, you can. I believe they all have been reclaimed now. But yeah, if they had not, or if I couldn't get a hold of them, then they would just fall into the cracks of copyright at a certain point in time. A court could have just ruled, no one clearly has interest in this, so therefore it's public domain.
Yeah. So it's a lot of work. Long story short, it is horrible that no one is actively making Lobo products.
Yeah. Right. So I guess the next question is, does Lobo work as a character? And we'll find out in this first issue.
I don't know, Eddie. He's branded for life, so you'd have to be careful.
He is branded for life. And this is the collector's issue we see on the cover. So, I mean, obviously they knew right away that was going to be a very important thing. So, yeah.
I do love the fact that it's 12 cents and it's like nearly 40 pages of a comic with a lot of text.
Yeah. So, actually, let's go talk about real quick is 60s comics and Dell comics specifically are a bit idiosyncratic compared to what we're used to. You're right. It is 40 issues of comic. Surprisingly, there are almost no ads. There are basically the back cover, both sides of the back cover. Each side has an ad, but otherwise there are no other ads in the comic. But a lot of comics around this time period were not. It wasn't just a solid 32 pages of story. They were broken up into distinct chapters, and each of those chapters had a part and a name. That was because previously in the 50s and 40s, each of those would be a separate story, and then therefore usually 6 to 8 pages, sometimes 4, sometimes bigger. But that way they could then be recompiled into different anthologies down the road. So it's like, cool, I need another 8 pages of Funny Animal comic. I would grab one of the Funny Animal comics, 8 pages long, drop it in, and reprint it. Right around the 60s is when longer form comic storytelling started happening, but the idea of there were these regular breaks in comics was still around, and many other comic publishers would use that space to go, print 8 pages, drop an ad or 2 in there, then do another 8 pages, and use those as a place to put ads in. Dell, at least for Lobo, didn't do that. It's just 32 pages of comic that occasionally, for random reasons, every few pages stops, has the logo and another introduction, and then keeps going. So to me, it feels very almost British comic, because we talked about this a little bit when we did Brink. Is, you know, just AD does 8-page, 7-page, 6-page things and stops and restarts it, even if it's an ongoing story. And in modern compilations, you almost don't see the seams, but if you start looking for it, you can see the pattern a little bit. But as you get older and older, when they couldn't digitally take the logos in and out, you'd see that every 7 pages it would just start again. Here's a Judge Dredd logo. Here's a recap of the thing you just read a minute ago. Blah blah. And Lobo has that same vibe, probably because at some point in the future they may have done just a Western compilation of 80 pages, and then they could have had Lobo be a running series through all of those if they wanted to.
When did you first learn about Lobo?
I learned about it just before you told me about the character. I stumbled across him 6 or 7 years ago when I was researching public domain superheroes, and he came up on a wiki of that. But at the time I was not interested in Western comics, so I was like, okay, cool. That's an interesting note that he's the first Black hero, comic book hero with his own title. But then otherwise, just didn't really do much with it. Then you pointed out, I read it in Haunted West, and then we started talking about Lobo, and you told me a little bit about Lobo. Shared the original comics with me. And so I read them at the time, and again, I was like, it's, interesting, but I wasn't much in the Westerns. So they've been sitting on my hard drive for several years, and then we talked about doing this again. I was like, actually, now that I have more context for Westerns, I may have a different relationship with this comic.
Awesome. That's like the perfect way now to actually get into it.
Sweet. So yeah, the cover, again, very 60s, lots of text on the cover because it's something that had to sit on a newsstand or a spinner rack and sell to kids. Lots of yellow and red, which is very visually striking. And again, like this comic is not hiding what this comic's about. It is about a Black gunslinger who is a honest man blamed for a crime he did not commit. It's definitely making it very clear what kind of comic's going to be.
And I love the fact that he is in blue with like brown for like the accents on top of like the red and yellows. Like that's super striking.
Yeah. So he stands out. The comic itself is striking, but he stands out from the rest of the color. And like the red is kind of just like it's shaped very roughly like his shadow, but it's also just kind of an interesting visual chunk of color. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely striking cover.
Do we know what year the television series The Fugitive actually came out? I know it was in the 60s. I'm curious, The Fugitive came out after this or before this?
That I don't know. It's been a minute.
Then since I don't know and I'm not going to Google it right now, I'm going to say The Fugitive read this comic, and so we can make an entire show about that. Just Fair modern enough. Day with the Doctor.
Fair enough.
So we can boost Harrison Ford's career in about 30 years. Yes, you're saying.
Yes, all part of your elaborate plan. So the inside front cover gives a slightly different version of the quote I gave, which basically just talks about the tragic war between the states. And so this is definitely post Civil War. Lots of ex-soldiers left and went west. And so talks about how many of the soldiers became cowboys. And it simply says, again, the cowboys came in all shapes, sizes, and temperaments, and they created all sorts of legends. Some were good, and some were bad, and some were indifferent. So, again, right off the bat, it's telling you there's a lot of Western history you probably aren't aware of.
Yeah. And just thinking, though, they did this in the 60s, making this comic, which is why I love it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I love it so much because it happened in the 60s. It's making a statement, it's trying to tell history, and it's trying to make it accessible. It's like 70 to 80% of my mission statement for Dark Horse Studios in the comic.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And so we start exactly 100 years, well, not exactly because it's December versus April, but like 100 years prior to this comic being printed, April of 65, where they're informed that a bunch of soldiers are informed that Lee has surrendered to Grant. The war is over. And one thing that I always get surprised by with older comics, and particularly when you get like past the 70s and the 60s and 50s, is how fast they move, right? Like the first panel is guy coming in saying the war's over. The next panel is many units were disbanded. And the third panel, the end of the first page, is the unnamed soldier. He will then be called Lobo. He doesn't have a name yet. Our main character. Oh, he's a private. Yeah, sorry. Private protagonist.
Private.
Right. He says after 4 years of being a soldier, I'm a free man. And someone goes, look what's moving down there. Like, this is just 3 panels, but like the war has ended, the unit got disbanded, this soldier is now free, and there's something else happening off panel. Like just fast-paced comic.
And these are all Union soldiers, and they're showing you the different types of soldiers in and of themselves without even talking about it or making it a thing.
Yep. And so what we find on the next page is that, and I believe this is, if you may correct me, but I think this is actually true, is that even though Lee surrendered, there are still Confederate units that kept fighting.
Yes, a lot of them. Some of them actually went over to Mexico, and they would like cross over the border back and forth, staging like, it was ongoing.
Right.
And they plagued still people for like years to decades afterwards.
Right. And so our private nearly gets shot. We see a bullet knock his hat off, and then he falls to the ground. So it implies that he was kind of knocked unconscious by the shot, but still managed to survive. And then the Confederates get killed, and it looks like a bunch of the. Actually, no, none of the Union soldiers seem to have been gotten killed. But it's like, you were lucky you weren't killed like them, and so we see private protagonist standing amongst just a sea of corpses
of the dead Confederates.
Yeah, and he looks pretty upset by this. And in fact, for how fast-paced this comic is, there's 2 panels, one on the bottom of page 2 and one at the top of page 3, really focusing on his face and how distraught he is by this violence. And so another soldier is like, what's gotten into you is us with them, and he shatters his rifle against a tree, which is really impressive, actually. It's hard to do.
Well, come on. They're soldiers, Eddie. That means they're physically fit. They're the best of the best in 1865.
Right, but also, like, guns were literally designed to not break apart in this instance, right? I mean,
that's like asking how when Batman punches people, their entire face shatters, but yet they don't die. Batman has protagonist strength. Lobo has protagonist strength.
Right. But for me, it helped because a lot of times with this Western one, we talk about is the role of violence and how violence plays into in the level of violence, how it plays into what kind of story it's telling. And so I'm looking at this page 3 going, okay, this is a slightly pulpier take on a Western. But one thing that's interesting about this page is that I'll just call him Lobo for clarity. Lobo, basically says, basically he's upset that no one should have died because the war is over, right? And the other soldiers are arguing with him, saying, but we were just protecting ourselves. And Lobo's like, it doesn't make any difference. Nothing was gained. It's just 5 dead men. But what's interesting to me is that there are 3 soldiers on this page. 2 of them, Lobo and one other soldier, having a conversation. All 3 of them are black.
Yeah.
Lobo is not the token black character in his own comic.
Which is what I've loved so far through it, because they've highlighted that without ever really talking about or making it a thing. The part I think they're trying to give to Southern states is that all the people that got killed were Confederates. So all Southern traitors. And it has the protagonist having a concern about them having died for no reason. which like ignores so much history and like everything else, but having him care about human life more than whose side they're on. Because then that goes and reflects in the war where they had like family fighting its family members and everything else, which is a part of the story that never really told. So it's touched on that. It sort of skirts up to about enslavement almost and like the impact it could have had, but totally doesn't go there. Like goes, nope.
Right, and one of the things that I'm finding about this comic is how, as we've talked about this with some of these Western films, is that it allows the reader to close reading of the comic gives you much more information. And so, like back on page 1, Loeb makes a comment of "I'm a free man again," right? Which definitely it could be read as I was a free man before I joined being a soldier, then I had to be a soldier, so I wasn't free to do what I wanted to as a soldier, and now I'm free again. Or it could be read as I was enslaved, I was free the first time from that, and then now I'm free again from my bond as being a soldier.
Yep. Like layers on layers, and unless you're thinking about it, it doesn't necessarily hit you, but it's something that when you read it and you learn something later, it would hit you then. So like that is amazing.
Yes. And that leads into his other point, which is that because he mentions earlier on that he sees himself as free of the burden of being a soldier, part of his anger now is that he's not a soldier anymore, right? None of us are soldiers. The war is over. We were mustered out. The unit was dissolved. So I hated doing the violence to begin with. I did so because I needed to. And now I don't want to have to do that anymore. And that's why I'm rejecting this violent action. And so he just gets on a horse and leaves. He's like, I'm done with this bullshit.
Which I don't know if they did it specifically for 65 because it was like 100 years from when they wrote it in 65, or because it was really in the Civil War and they're focusing then, or if they wanted to avoid the 9th and 10th Cavalry that could have potentially sucked Lobo in that was formed in 66.
Right.
So
I see. Maybe it was over a long-term plan.
Yeah, like that's so many, and I don't know if I'm just writing it. By the way, copyright on that entire idea. That's my IP, so you can't have it. Noted right now.
Right, exactly. That's totally how copyright works. So he talks to his horse a bit, and we find out that
wait, Eddie.
What?
You're skipping over like one of the biggest things.
No, I'm not.
Midnight. Whose horse was Midnight, Eddie?
I was about to say, is like, he explains the fact that he was an ex-rebel general's horse that he bought for a sack of flour. Right. And specifically, it's great. Like, well, Fall of the Sun, it's ex-private riding a Reb general's horse, bought the sector. Doesn't make much sense, but nothing much does these days, right? Again, tells you a lot, and also tells you, like I said, fills in backstory. We didn't need to see him buying the horse, right? But the fact is that 3 panels later, they reiterate an ex-private and a Reb general's horse bought for a sack of flour after a bitter struggle of war and turmoil. It's like, this is a bit, right? So I didn't think they need to say it twice on the same page. But it does, again, tell you this is a character that has existed before this comic started. He's not being created on the page. He already exists, and we're just finding out about a story and filling in the gaps as we go.
And the fact that they show like different sunsets and just him riding along shows a progression of time for him. But it also reinforces one of the things for Haunted West that I thought was going to be essential was having like personalized horses. So there's like a horse mechanic that you roll up and everything else, because if you're spending all your time traveling and riding, your horse is just an essential part of you as like a gun or your clothing. And to see the bond between like him and a horse, like the horse is now essentially his best friend because that horse is with you the whole time. It's here for this. It's also not so much for The Witcher because Geralt kills horses left and right and just calls his new horse by the same name. So it's different.
Right.
But for like Red Dead Redemption and something like that, where the horse is a key to like the Western cowboy aesthetic.
Right. And what's interesting to me is that you're absolutely right. I recognize that as a strong trope of Westerns, of the protagonist having a name for his horse and a relationship with his horse. And yet, this is, I think, maybe not the first time, but one of the few times where that relationship, that trope has been so strongly called out in this run.
Yeah.
Well,
we could go and talk about Briscoe, but we did that for the Patreon.
Exactly. I was going to say, Briscoe's the only other time that came up, but that wasn't part of this run. Yeah. And also, Comet was kind of a joke in a sense of he's the strongest character in the whole series, and that was kind of the gag, you know.
It doesn't matter if it's a gag, though. It leaned into the trope and it made it totally part of it.
It totally did, right? And then we have a quick a moment of again low-key racism, where in the middle of his traveling, he gets on a raft to take across a river. And the guy who runs the raft says 4 bits for you, 4 bits for the horse. And then after a beat, it says in advance, right? Again, nothing you could point to, but clearly there's a implication that why is this ex-soldier being asked to pay in advance? Gee, I wonder what the reason is, right?
And it's subtly reinforced because most of them are in shadow and you can't really tell anything, but they do go out of their way to color his hand white, so you know that it's a white dude that's doing that to him.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's small little touches that like bring it all together.
Right. So we get to part 2 for Signs of Trouble, and again we're just cut right to Lobo's on a ranch, and already like the very first panel, 2 ranch hands are talking to Lobo, or talking about Lobo, I should say, Smoker and Ace. And they talk about they're hearing that the soldiers are coming over to the west and looking for jobs, and they're trying to see if the soldiers are as tough as they hear. One thing I noticed here, but I couldn't find it. I don't know if it's consistent. But Smoker's skin tone seems to be slightly redder in tone than the other characters on this page. And but a lot of his profile is in shadow through other pages, so I can't tell if he's intended to be colored like a Native American or if that was just a slightly redder tint on that page or what. But
yeah, I can't really tell myself because that was something I was noticed myself and I was looking at, but I couldn't quite suss it out.
Right.
I will point out though that what strikes me is the use of the word figure in this panel when he first shows up.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I'm going to leave it there. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Now, I mean, there is some colloquialism because, like, Ace says "looky," L-O-O-K-E-E. So one "o" them soldiers. So like, there's a little bit of writing in dialogue, not nowhere near like Claremont levels, but certainly some of that. But yeah, that word lands on the page interestingly, especially because afterwards, Lobo's like, can we gentlemen tell me where to find a boss? And then Ace goes, this gentleman would like know where the boss is, and like the word gentleman is bolded to give stress to it.
Yeah.
So like it again can be read as he's just being sarcastic because he's already said that he wants to see how tough this guy is, but it also can be read as he could be in his mind he's saying boy here, right?
Yeah.
So Smoker actually slaps Midnight on the rump to get, and Lobo gets knocked off the horse, and they laugh at him. The boss comes in and starts, berating them for messing with the guy. And so the boss is like, shut up. What do you want? And Lobo's like, I was going to ask if you need help, but clearly I need to prove myself. So he then immediately starts doing all of the cowboy tropes. He jumps over a fence, he rides sideways, he grabs someone's gun as he rides by and shoots a post, and then throws the gun away. I mean, he's just basically like, listen, I have all the points in cowboy.
That would, if for a soldier, some of that would overlap. I don't think they ever said what unit he's in, because if he's a cavalry, then it would make sense he could do all the horse stuff right away. But we also don't know how long it's been since he left.
Right. Like, and to your point, like I always, as it means, I by this page, I assumed he was cavalry. Specifically because the riding on the horse sideways thing, I believe that is a cavalry move to avoid getting shot while you were riding into battle. The grabbing someone's gun out of their holster as you ride by, just a little more showy offy. But again, like in the battlefield, wherever you get, you get off the horse. And also, just I love 60s sound effects. It's because he shoots at a post. We only see one explosion, but it's pow, bam, crack, blam, zing, which because of the sound effects, looks like he unloaded the whole cylinder into this thing.
Yeah.
So the boss is pleased, but Ace is pretty upset. We see a clenched fist because Ace looks like he's been made fun of. And the boss is like, why don't you have a gun? It's like, I threw it away. I got tired of shooting. The boss is like, cool. Anyway, here's a gun. I'll take out of your pay. Thanks. I didn't want this, but I guess.
He explains to him why the gun is important. Like shoot snakes and all this other stuff. There are a lot of other uses you have for it necessarily other than shooting a person.
Right. And specifically, he says equalize in air quotes. So like very much implies like it's defensive weaponry. You know, if bandits try to steal the cattle or whatever, you can defend yourself against them. That seems like what he's implying.
It depends on who you are when you read it.
Sure.
Because you're saying bandits, and I think racist.
Fair. I mean, entirely fair. And the nice thing about this comic is that only a few pages in already, that ambiguity is very clear on the page. If it happened once or twice, it could just be chalked up to it's very fast paced and maybe we're missing a nuance here. But it's happened frequently enough that I'm with you. I feel like they're going up to what they could say in 1965 to talk about a thing in a kid's comic book as much as they can.
And I love the fact also when you're going, since we're on this page, but it goes down to we have him saying maybe Ace and Smoker aren't that bad. It's showing you the complexity of being a black person having to exist in from what looks like now for him a primarily white space. So you start trying to like make accommodations for people and everything else. While we know they're super racist and they're going to get him eventually. So it's that constant threat that he's trying to assuage himself of.
Yeah, I mean, there are several panels where he's doing cowboy stuff branding. They're making fun of the cook's meal. So like again, there's room for time has passed and he has made friends here. But you're right. It's like he's talking to his horse about this, so he's not that close to them. And he's still suspicious because he's like, they aren't so bad, just playful, I suppose. So like how much, but you and I have talked frequently about how playful is code for I'm going to say a horrible thing and then code it with, oh, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But I really meant the thing I actually said. So that's part 2. Part 3 on the trail. Again, this very short parts. We now see that Lobo has settled into being a cowboy. He's starting to enjoy it, but Ace is still thinking that he is quote unquote high and mighty. So even though Lobo is saying I think they're just being playful, it's very clear that Ace is not being playful. He still hates Lobo.
Because it's playing on the insidiousness of racism and the multiple levels of it. And 65, Eddie. 65.
Yeah. And there's an interesting panel about, they talk about the driving in north. There's an interesting panel where Lobo and the boss are talking about how the steer are only worth $8 a head in Texas, but in Abilene they're worth $24, maybe $25. And so kind of explains in one panel the economics of why driving cattle across large chunks of lands is valid and important.
Yeah. I love the next panel.
Yeah. The next panel we cut to immediately because so the last panel is like, we'll find out we're going to Abilene tomorrow. Next panel, we see a guy in a beard with mutton chops is like, let's say dry customers may. Judging by these boys' smiles, I say we'll be busy tonight. And there's a woman standing next to him in a frilly dress. So it's like, again, could read this as just it's the bartender saying, I'm going to give this guy's wiki, but also the way he says, judging by their boys' smiles and dry customers could also be, you will get a chance to have sex with them and get money for that.
Yes. She could be like they could just be working in a saloon, or it could be a brothel.
Oh, yes. And so they start drinking, and Red Carson, who appears to be another of the cowboys, says, hey, I'm buying everyone drinks. And Lobo's like, I'm good. I got one cold glass. And Red starts pushing the issue. It's like, are you refusing to drink with me? He's like, no, I just don't want another drink. Throws the drink on him. And I'm going to jump ahead, but jump back real quick. Is like Lobo ends up knocking him off his feet with a punch. But right before that, we get a close up. It's a shot that's kind of far and back behind Lobo, and we see his hand by his gun before he punches him. And it's his left hand before he punches him with his left hand. So two things happen very quickly, right? One, we find out he's left-handed, which was not clear prior to this, or maybe ambidextrous. But given the fact that the focus on his left hand and then he punched his left hand, he's probably left-handed. But two, by just the camera angle, the way that I say camera angle, but the way that was drawn, the direction that was drawn in, implies that Lobo thought about shooting him without ever actually putting a thought bubble in his head. He just said, don't do it, friend, and then knocks him off his feet.
It's showing conscious choices for the character, which is great.
Yes. And it does something that comic books can only do, which is you're seeing the thought process through the art.
And it's also telling the story that he'll only have one because he knows the environment he's in and he needs to keep a clear head. Like, there's the level of storytelling there too.
Right. And again, even better, like, everyone else vacates the area and Lobo just goes back to the bar to finish his drink, which is amazing.
And I'm stressing the one drink because that is something I myself do when I'm around a bunch of people who I don't know or who I know are not necessarily good people. And I'll leave it at that.
Yes. One of my regular frustrations with being a writer specifically is how our profession has normalized alcohol with business discussions. And so therefore I also don't like to drink a lot because I don't like to have business conversations while drunk. And also I've normalized also because a number of times I've been into professional functions with my wife. She also does not want to drink heavily because she is a woman. And so by me drinking at the same pace as her, then therefore I try to normalize that, it's no, it's just because we just don't want to drink a lot, right? It's a way to kind of do that. But you're right. It is his request is extremely reasonable, and Red Carson's response is extremely unreasonable, and the comic makes that very clear.
So for me, part of it comes down to the fact that I'm known for drinking. Like that is what people would know me for amongst my many things.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm limiting it to like one or two drinks at most for me when I'm in a crowd of other people, because I need to regulate how they're engaging with me and monitor that all the time. Because I'll even keep it to our industry. In our industry, God, I can't say that now because I'm like a full-time industry person. After we'll jump back to like 2017, 2018, after I won 3 gold innings for like Harlem Bound, I had someone walk up to me and tell me I don't deserve those, like a white person. Bam.
Wow.
And I thought I told you this story. Yeah, during the inning ceremony. And then I had some other people approach me later that night kind of saying the same thing. So I don't ever get to just like relax and do that. Sure. I have to be like conscientious of everyone around me in the environment, which is why when I'm out, I'll have a drink or so, like with people in BS, and I'll hang out in the bar because I like hanging in the bar because it's easy to people watch.
Right. The bar is a useful center, but the alcohol isn't them. And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually kind of glad that Gen Z is starting to normalize alcohol is not the only path forward for these things. Like among Gen Z, alcohol, like pubs are struggling because Gen Z don't go to pubs to drink anymore. That's not how they socialize anymore. So I'm like, yes, continue this trend.
I think there's a better balance, but I'm mostly in agreement with you.
Right. Anyway, so Red gets up again and is like, you better be useful handling guns. And Lobo's like, I can, but nothing good comes from shooting. Now, do you want to have a drink? No one's stopping you. So we continue to see that Lobo's struggle. Well, before he was like, I reject violence. Now he's clearly struggling with it a little bit, right? So if I'm moved to, I will shoot you dead, but I don't want to. Do you want to have a drink? And Red's like, you know what? Turns out you're right. You have a right to refuse a drink. Is it okay if I sit with you, peaceful? And it's like, yeah, sure, not a problem. And of course, that means Ace and his buddy are like, that means you're scared because they're idiots.
You mean, is he essentially saying, I don't want to kill you and you don't want to be dead, Eddie? Is that what he's saying?
Yes, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a future joke.
That's a future joke. But
for anyone that's curious, just think of Danny Glover and you'll understand.
Right. So the two cowpokes who have been hassling him since the previous part are like, well, obviously that means you're scared to fight, because they missed the part where he knocked him down with one punch. And so they go to swing. Lobo misses, partially because Red actually helps him. Look out, stranger. And then Red jumps to his defense and starts a brawl as Lobo just leaves the bar fight. Like the whole bar starts to fight, and he literally, like, he starts walking out of the frame, and then eventually out the door.
Yeah.
It's like Lobo didn't start the fight. Lobo was very clear he doesn't want to be involved in violence, and proves that by actually leaving the bar fight.
I think we can all read into that when the sheriff shows up, it is likely not going to be in the best interest for black people to be there after that bar fight.
Right. And but the way he handles it is so smooth because someone jokes, is like, it sounds like a good fight, why are you leaving? And he's like, might as well, that they're getting along without me. Right. And it's just like, he's got such a level head. So his lines strike the right balance of, they sound like a thing that this character would say, but also are still Western protagonist cool, which is great. And so he's, so he goes back to midnight again, the only person he could talk to. And he's like, hopefully tomorrow Ace the Smoker will calm down, but then we're heading back to Texas. So next page, it points out that the boss and the rest of the boys are actually ahead of him, so he's going to catch up in time for lunch. And then he sees the wagon, but finds something isn't right. And turns out Smoker and Ace have murdered the boss and taken the money. But they say is that okay? There's a word balloon misalignment here. It's not quite in the right order. Because how it should be read is, you killed the boss and took the money, get the rope, Smoker, and then Lobo says, no, you got it all wrong, I just rode up and found them. And then Smoker saying, we're going to have some real trail justice. It's super clear the way that it's paced that they did this and are planning to blame Lobo for it.
Yeah.
Because they start to explain, you wait for the boss until the money from cattle. It's like, but I don't have the money. It must have been Johnson. He's the only one that I accounted for. And again, so at that point, it's like, maybe there's a misunderstanding, but then Johnson's probably in on it. And it's okay. No, it's, at least when I'm reading this, it's like, it's pretty clear they organized this.
And when they say trail justice, it literally shows him with a rope.
Yeah.
Like there's if you know what that means, there's no way to misinterpret that. But if you don't know what that means, you're just thinking, maybe they're going to tie him up.
And Lobo, but Lobo even says, I'm not hanging for this, right? So Lobo at least knows what's going on. Now, again, it's enough ambiguity that, like, whether they're going to hang him immediately or they're going to tie him up, take him back to a sheriff, and then get hung for it because he can't prove that he didn't do it, is ambiguous. But again, where we're reading it from our perspective, it's pretty clear they're probably going to hang him up right there.
Yeah.
Now we get back to the strange coloring, because for this page, Smoker is black. No, Ace is black through all of this. No, it's Smoker. Smoker's black all of this. Where he was Native American before for a little bit, so like that's a little unclear.
Or white. So it's hard to tell, but like part of it is it feels like someone may have decided to change him during the course of the story.
Maybe, yeah. Right. And Lobo kind of fights his way through and basically say, just because I swore not to kill doesn't mean I won't shoot. And that's when he gets called Lobo. It's like, that's what you are. You're a Lobo. You're a lone wolf. And then, you know, and it's like, if I'm a Lobo, it was forced on me. I'll ride to the end of the world, but I'll find Johnson. So he's convinced that Johnson's responsible for this.
And to point out, we're 16, 17 pages into this 36-page comic now.
Yeah. I mean, this is dense. This is a fast-moving comic, but this is it's fast-moving comic in the sense of the plot is moving on a fast pace, but every panel is doing something, right? There's not a lot of the one time where there was redundancy or nuance, I should say, was when we had those two panels of Lobo's reaction to violence after he was drummed out of being a soldier or decommissioned as a soldier. But other than that, every panel is progressing the plot in some way, which is a lot of talking, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a 30-page comic you read in 10 minutes. You have to take your time and really read through it.
But those two panels are essential because it's reinforcing the rest of the story up to here and why we haven't seen Lobo shoot anybody.
Right. Now, Lobo's refusal to use violence is central to his character for this comic. And so we have to spend a moment to really make that clear how important it is to him. I
would rephrase that, his unwillingness to use deadly violence.
Sure. Okay, fair. Okay, let's even better.
He doesn't want to kill. Out.
He doesn't want to kill. Right. That's really what it says. He keeps saying violence, but really comes down to he doesn't want to kill anymore. Anyway, so he's like, I'm gonna go find Johnson, and they're like, you know, you'll ride to the end of the earth, but he's now an outlaw. So we're to part 4, the brand sticks. And so we see Ace and Smoker go back into town, gotten the sheriff, and tells the same story they've already concocted in their heads, which is that all the money was taken by a Lobo, no good Maverick Lobo. Like, and immediately everyone knows, you know, like in his head that, you know, Lobo stuck, but like if the sheriff's like, who the hell is this Lobo guy? And it's like, and they specifically say he never said what his name was, but Lobo's as good as any for a wanted poster. So the character we know as Lobo never revealed his name because he wanted to live a whole life.
Which then could be read into is that part of it is that he potentially did escape from the South, which means there would have been enslaved catchers trying to hunt him all that time, which would have taught him not to give his name, and maybe that just sort of stuck with the character, which would be what I would add on from my understanding of history and everything else. But the comic gives me that space to do that.
Right. One of the things comics is doing really well is that it's pitching things in a way that a kid just reading a fun Western story about a man who's wrongfully accused of being a criminal and trying to get revenge and prove that he's not who he says he is completely there. But you're right. People who actual knowledge of history can see these actions in a different light, but it doesn't invalidate the actions. It's not a different story. It's just a deeper story if you understand some of the more potentially adult themes that might be happening here. Excellent. Great. So Lobo starts seeing wanted posters, realizes it's him. And he's like, you know, I got to figure out some way to keep ourselves alive until that he realizes he's hunted. And then like the next page, or the next panel, I should say, we jump right to 2 prospectors were killed. That also gets blamed on Lobo. And they say that he's ridden a coal black Arabian horse. And Lobo, best line is like, now they branded you too, Midnight. And it's just like, he's slightly more annoyed that his horse is now being branded as a criminal than he being branded as a criminal. And I genuinely love that. It's just like, oh Midnight, poor kid. And so he's like, we need to lay low, but then in the process of thinking that, he sees a man drowning in a river, and so he uses his lasso to pull him out. And guy's like, oh, thank you so much. He's like, don't worry about it. A man in trouble don't owe anybody a thing, which again shows Lobo's nobility, right? He's like, he would do this for anyone, and he did that even though he knows that he's being hunted, but he's like, this man's in trouble. That's just what you do. And he's like, who do I say rescued me? It's like, no one will believe you, but say it was Lobo. I heard you were a killer. And it's like, yeah, lots of people have said that. But the prospector's like, no, wait, let me help you. And Lobo's like, how can you help me? It's like, well, let me tell you a story. And then we get your favorite trope of a flashback.
But it is essential for this story, so I let it go as it builds up who he is, which becomes important to Lobo's story. Right. And it's not like a season and a half of him talking about the island, what I did on the island, and then the flashback changing every season because they have more plot and budget they need to add it.
Right. No, and it's only 4 panels too. It's not even a whole page. But basically, the prospector used to work at a bank, finds out that someone's taking money. He got blamed for the mismanagement of funds, and so he ran, as opposed to sticking around proving his worth, which again parallels very well with Lobo, another man who was wrongly accused of a crime. But he's like, I left, so I went out west, and I can never go back. Right? I have burned that life to the ground. I can never return. And it's like, I figured out. I love his like, I figured out should I get rich, and then once I had money, I'll go back for my innocence. But it took me a really long time to should I get rich, so I'm just gonna stay here forever with my gold. And then Lobo's like, okay, so cool story, bro, but why are you telling me? And it's like, well, I'm also really old, so why don't you use my gold to prove your innocence? And Lobo is immediately like a millionaire.
But it's the fact that he rejects the offer, Eddy, like any hero does. You reject the calling.
Right. It's like, I can't take your gold. And it's like, you gave me back my life. Now I could do some good. It's like, I realize I care more about life than I care about gold. Here you go. Also, I minted gold coins with a wolf and an L on it for you.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it.
And that's why I said before, like, it's like, it's kind of pulpy, like, people are getting knocked out in one shot, but they're still reasonably grounded. It's like, no, we have gone full into Lone Ranger style territory now.
The minting of the gold coins, like, we assume less than a day because it's like diagonal panels.
Right.
Is a little pulpy. The rest of it isn't unreasonable because there are boxers that knock people out with one punch.
Sure, right. And honestly, where I kind of landed tone-wise, I'm jumping ahead slightly, but where I landed tone was like Zorro, right? Zorro has flair and panache, or Scarlet Pimpernel, right? Like, they have flair and panache, they have a brand, but the actual action is moderately reasonable based on our understanding of how the world works.
Yeah. If anything, he's just really lucky to not be shot as often as he is, but at the same time, it could be because other people have bad shots.
Right. So anyway, so he gives them a bunch of branded gold coins, and then the prospector, in like the most bleakly funny line, right, is like, come back whenever, because I'll be here until I die.
It's like a parent guilting their child.
Yes.
Please come back and visit me before I die.
Right. But then Lobo clarifies that, like, we've been seeing him being attached to a few things, but Lobo talking to Midnight clarifies that he's being accused of basically every unsolved crime and killing. So if there's something that no one knows what's going on, Lobo is just being branded with it.
Part of it is, though, that's how it works.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a nice Nice touch for the Western flair.
Right. Again, like it's you could read it as he's being branded this because he is a mysterious outlaw, or he's being branded this because he's a black man. Both of those narratives work just fine, right?
We go back to the old premise, though, that for a lot of it, I'm trying to, you print the legend, not the truth, is what the Old West was at the end of the day.
Right. And so he kind of laments on how he has enough money, but he's being taking the part of everyone that's ever been done wrong, right? So very much I'm going to use this money to become a good vigilante. Very, I was going to say Batman, but really more Green Arrow, where it's like I have money, but I'm using it exclusively to help other people out, as opposed to Batman, which is kind of uses money also for his own benefit.
How does Green Lantern only use his money to help other
Green
people
Arrow.
out?
Not Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
How does Green Arrow do that?
I mean, later versions of Ollie, basically, he more or less funnels the money directly into a lot of like charity organizations. And like, all I need is a few arrows, an occasional thing. Like, yes, there's some gimmick arrows, but he doesn't have a ton of tech. I'm not talking about TV Green Arrow. I'm talking about like, because TV Green Arrow is basically Batman. I'm talking about later comic Oliver Queen.
Okay. I don't know a lot about that one. I will let it go, but that feels sketchy to me, Eddie. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Oliver Queen is explicitly a communist in the 60s and 70s, right? Comics, so.
I'll let it go. Until I read some more Green Arrow.
Anyway, part 5, an old friend, in quotes. And so turns out, right before the end of the last page, someone's taking shots at him, and turns out it's Red Carson. And he finds, like, oh wait, you're the guy I had a drink with. You're one of the people are calling Lobo. And he explains that Ace and Smoker hung around after the killing and ended up robbing the bank, and he was out to get them. So Ace and Smoker basically made up a story, got Lobo blamed, waited till the heat was off of them for a minute, and then robbed the bank and fucking bailed. And Red Carson, it's so great because Lobo's like, why are you out here hunting him alone? And like, and it's right at the end of a page. So in my head, I'm going, oh, I'm a badass. No, he's like, I was with the posse and got lost. Great use of the comic medium that where you have a half a second to think about what he's probably going to say, and it's completely different.
Which is a better story, though, than me just being a badass hunting them.
Oh. Right. But the way he says it doesn't. It says I was with the posse, and so Lobo's like, that's suspicious. I don't know. So he's like, I want to look at those saddlebags. And then he's like, well, I guess if you didn't kill him, if you say it's true, I guess it's fine. And Lobo's like, I'm going to ride with you, rejoin the posse. And it's like, and then Red Carson's like, actually, no, it's cool. I'll just go by myself over here. And Lobo's like, yeah, nobody, and punches him the fuck out. And it turns out that Red Carson has banknotes in his thing, so he was also part of the bank robbery. Who could have predicted?
What I love though is when he pulls out the banknotes, like the big wads of cash, his hands have that red glow around them with the white turning them, how the cover emblem of the word Lobo does.
Yeah.
That has not been used anywhere else in the comic, I don't think.
No, and because we know this is not a supernatural comic, we know that's just an emphasis bit. It's not like his hands are actually glowing or the money's glowing or anything like that. It's just emphasis to really make sure you see the money in his hands. And of course Red's like, oh, fine, we can split the money. And Lobo's like, yeah, no, I'm taking you in because you're a bank robber. And so Red's like, I don't understand. I give you a chance to be rich, and now you risk your neck. And he's like, that's just how it is. Because that's Lobo, right? He's like, he's an honest man who believes in justice and law, and he will risk himself getting captured to make sure this bank robber goes back. But Ace and Smoker jump them, ambush them, and then he says, hey, untie me, Ace, and we can split the money. And it's like, you ain't taking us twice, Carson. So what actually happened, and again, just in one line, what actually happened is Ace, Smoker, and Reds, after the fight with Lobo, when Lobo left the fucking fight, the three of them got together, decided to rob a bank. Then Red took the money from them and fucking bailed. Right? They've caught up to him, accidentally got Lobo in the crossfire, and they're like, we're just going to murder both of you.
But he wins a day with that gold coin. Like that. Right. Oh.
Right, because he's like, what's that in your hand? Looks like a gold piece. And it's like, well, let me look at that gold piece. And then he holds it in his left hand and clocks him with the right, which I think at this point proves he's ambidextrous, but yeah.
This is the pulpiest scene in the whole comic for me.
Yes.
I let a lot of it go, but like, ooh, look, shiny. And him go, shiny?
Right. Now, I will point out, like, by this point in time, Smoker has been more consistently colored black than white, so I think you're probably right. He probably changed decision. And so I was making black instead, and I just didn't correct the previous pages.
Yeah. And to show that these are the primary bad guys, Eddie, they don't get automatically knocked out with one punch.
No.
See?
And then there's this great scene where Ace just has the drop on him. He has the gun out, pointed at Lobo, says, don't move. And Lobo's hands are pretty far away from his sides. The next panel, Lobo has the gun in his hand and has shot Ace's pistol out his other hand. So because of the way the comic's structured, how fast Lobo is, right? Just purely by how these static images are shown. There's no movement lines or anything, but by the way it's structured and paced, we see how fast the character is.
I think he's faster than the Waco Kid.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe he could shoot many miles away to explode some. Bam. And so he takes all three of them in as bank robbers. And then the sheriff's like, is that? Yeah, I think it's sheriff. No, the guy with the sideburns is the saloon owner. They're like, going ahead as a reward for all the bank robbers and for Lobo too. And so he gives the sheriff. It's like, you see the money in the bags. I'm Lobo. I gotta take you in. And it's like, don't nobody move. Look, I'm a little unclear at this point in time because he said nobody move, but then we've moved to the jail. And he said now that's done. So
I think what happens is that he walks him over to the jail at gunpoint to make sure that he doesn't arrest him.
Right. I think that's what happened. It seems like what happened. But it's one of the few times where the fast pace of the comic actually left me a little confused. But ultimately, again, the now that's done thing line helps to clarify that. So that's what I think the writer may have been like, oh, okay, this is jumping a bit. So let me add a line here. But then we find out, is there a wrangler named Johnson? And sheriff's like, yeah, he's been here spending money. Where can I find him? He busts up a few places before he left, so he was out hiding west. Sorry, he goes left. Then we cut to a thing where Lobo's asking a woman, and a woman or child says, heading west. Oh, so son. Okay, so it's a boy, actually. But it has lots of very, very poofy hair. Yeah. But it's like, so the town's like, why didn't you arrest him, sheriff? And it's like, I don't know, but he gave me this Lobo coin, so it seems pretty cool.
It's like his bat signal, Eddie. Lobo is more Bat Bay than Green Arrow. He just doesn't have like a light that goes to the sky.
But the funniest thing about this is like what actually happens is we have the sheriff holding the coin, and he says, I don't know, there's something about him. And like it very well could be read as like, I don't know, it just seems very noble, and that nobility kind of came across that. But the fact he's holding the coin, it's supposed to be here's Lobo's symbol, blah, blah. But it really reads to me like, I don't know, something about him because he gave me fucking money. And I started letting him walk.
Oh, God. It could be both.
I love that. It could be both. He goes up to where they say Johnson's at, and there's some Native Americans are here, and I was like, oh no, Lobo, you've been doing so well as a comic. Please don't go where I'm worried you're going to go.
Nope.
And to be fair, the comic doesn't. Johnson is staked to the ground, left to die. And it's like, what happened? It's like, I stole one of their horses and got caught and shot the chief's son. And I'm like, let the fucker die, Lobo. And as he admits, yes, I was the person who did the killings. Money's gone. I lost everything. And he dies. And Lobo's like, great. I can't prove it now. Brands it for life. And so we cut to him at a grave. So again, implying he dug a grave for Johnson.
Yep.
And then it's like, I'm destined, this is meant to be this way, I'm destined to take the part of those wrongfully judged and condemned. No sense of going back. Johnson's dead, Ace Smoker get a trial. So we're going to go back to the old timers cabin. And then we go to part 6, a sad ending. Spoilers. And the old timer is dying. So when he said, I'll be here until I'm dead, I didn't realize it was going to be like 8 pages later.
But come on, who knows how long went through, how much time passed in those 8 pages?
Oh, sure, right. But in my head, I was like, okay, cool. So the old timers could be like kind of his Alfred, the support guy that, like helps him to find more gold and gives him resources. Nope, he's going to fucking die. And it's actually really tragic because like Lobo straight up says, you're the only friend I have. You're the only person who gets what it's like for me. And the prospector's like, I ran for 20 years. You don't have to worry about that. People will come to trust you. You're strong. You're stronger than I am. And it's like, just fine. Just, prove it. And it's like, yeah, but Johnson's dead. I can't do that. And it's like, doesn't matter. But then he says the whitest thing ever, which is once a man is judged guilty, it takes more than another man's word to prove otherwise. You'll have to prove it. You'll spend your life showing people justice isn't dead. You started the way you pulled me out of that river. And it's just like, from a kid's story about a justice-seeking vigilante, totally makes sense, right?
Yep, that way it does.
But this is one of the very few places where I'm reading the comic going, okay, but it doesn't actually work that way,
And there's the thing, yes, black man, go forth through the world and prove yourself to every single person you encounter for the rest of your life.
Fair. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah. Which, from a comic standpoint, that's how you get your adventure and everything else and turn it into an ongoing series. From thinking about it as an adult, that is my lived experience. Why would I want to read about that?
Right. But again, like the prospector is saying just the implication of, and then at some point in time, people will believe you and it'll be fine, right? And that's the part that is why I said it's the whitest thing ever, because it's like, no, like you said, it's something you're constantly having to prove. But they take him out to see a sunset. And it says, remember, Lobo, you got a promise to keep for you and for me. And Lobo's upset. And then we end with the quote I started at the beginning, talking about how Lobo doesn't deserve to be forgotten, which when it was written, the idea was actually worked on 2 levels. Again, kids comic level of here's a cool character you've never heard of because we just made him up, and so it doesn't get forgotten because this is a cool character we're making. On the second level, it's here's a black character, and the fact that black cowboys were a thing should not be forgotten. Again, reiterated by the front of the comic. And then we now, in retrospect, have his third layer of the comic book was actually forgotten.
Yeah.
And then now slowly coming back into some sort of public consciousness. And so people are starting to remember and reclaim this character and getting a little more visibility. People like you, for example. So like, you are doing your part to make sure that Lobo, specifically this comic, is not forgotten. But it is a very poignant ending to this issue.
And the other thing I really want to point out is that Lobo has been a super cool, strong protagonist this entire time. In one of the last panels the last panel we see of his face is him crying over the loss of his friend. Like, that is unbelievably powerful. Out of all the Western protagonists we've seen, how many of them have taken a human moment to, like, actually cry or have some sort of thing like that to show their more human side?
Right, and that's one thing that I really liked about Lobo. I'm glad we talked about this again after this run we're doing so far, because like I have been able to see a wider variety of Western protagonists beyond the archetypal, stereotypical Western protagonist. And so when I first read this, I was like, okay, it's he's the calm, stoic Western protagonist. But now I've seen that a lot more. Too many of them are calm and stoic and are quick to use violence as the ultimate solution. And that's not actually Lobo's doing something extremely different. Whereas he's using death as a last resort, which again works in a very kid-friendly violence way. He's not going to kill anybody, and so it's a good thing for kids to learn. That murder's not the solution. And very comics code in a lot of that. But it ends up being an interesting, tragic character because he is believed to be a killer, and he is believed to be a villain. He refuses to be exactly the thing he's being accused of, and so you get something more like Robin Hood. There's a bit of Robin Hood DNA in here of the thing you're accusing me of doing, I would never do, but I'm going to use that reputation as a cloak to do ultimately good things. The difference is Robin Hood was a thief and used fear of thievery as a way to actually give back to the people who were institutionally stolen from. And Lobo is doing the same thing. The people who are downtrodden and misremembered and abused, he's going to use his notoriety as a killer as a way to help protect them from people, to make sure they don't go through the same problem he did. So again, there's kind of a similar DNA going on in that sense, which I find really, really compelling and interesting. And it's like I really would read several more issues of this because I would love to see him get wrapped up in situations and inevitably be accused of either doing the thing that he tried to stop or people unsure about how to deal with them, but then you give him a gold coin and it's like, oh, look, we have this gold coin from Lobo, which proves that he's a good guy and not because it's a solid gold coin that I will use to financially enrich myself, right? There's a lot of interesting nuance there, and given how frequently that nuance is happening through comic, I am very inclined to believe that it was intended from the start rather than just an accident that they stumbled across.
Totally agree. How do we know, though, that he didn't give the sheriff that gold coin to pay for the damages that Johnson had done in town? Look at that.
It could be. It could be, absolutely, right?
My thing is, every time now having you heard that, and I was thinking it before, is that he goes from town to town, and then I envision at the end of the comic, as he's riding off at midnight, the Lonely Man theme starts playing.
Right. Yeah. Now that you say that, there is a fair amount of the original Incredible Hulk DNA in this, right?
Yeah. Maybe the Incredible Hulk has Lobo's DNA.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, there's a fair number of fiction of the person who is wrongly accused of being a criminal who then uses that to enact justice. But I can't think of too many beyond, again, Robin Hood that predate this comic specifically. So, like, I know you're doing it half jokingly, but like, there's a fair amount of, did the idea start here on some level?
Yeah. Because I'm willing to bet Bill Bixby would have probably read Lobo. He was up on some of his knowledge for comics, so.
Sure, yeah. And one thing that we dance around a bit when we talk about these older comics is the idea of a comic book reader being a marginalized, specialized geek interest wasn't present in the 50s and 60s. Comics were just popular entertainment in the same way that television is popular entertainment now, right? Or streaming, I should say, more accurately. So like people of all ages, all genders, all races read comics around this time period. So yeah, entirely possible that Bill Bixby as a kid may have read this. Entirely possible that other people who went on to make other stories like this may have picked up this comic, especially if it was, in bargain bins in the back of, someone's store. It's like, oh, I forgot I even had that comic. Sure, 12 cents. Here you go. Right.
Yeah. So then, what are your final thoughts on issue 1, Lobo branded for life?
I actually really liked it. I'm glad that I came back to it, because one thing I have learned about my habits over my life is that just because I don't get something or grok something the first time I read, it doesn't necessarily mean that I won't appreciate it better on the second one, and vice versa. Sometimes things I really loved, I've gone back to and it's like, oh, this is not as good as I thought it was because I've learned things or my tastes have changed. But I do think it helped me to reread this after watching a bunch of westerns because now I'm able to extract better what are stereotypes, what are archetypes, what are tropes, and what are actual trends in westerns. I can see this a bit more for what it's doing, both as a western and as a separate comic book. And I find both of those threads interesting. But now that I have a better appreciation of each thread, putting those together, I have a much better appreciation for the whole product.
And pretty much probably goes without saying that I love this comic. It is not perfect, but it's also from 65, well ahead of its time. And given that I wanted to slot it right essentially after Buck and the Preacher and Blazing Saddles, you can see it's not even a progression because those happened after this comic happened, but it fits nicely into that sort of niche. And I wanted it to be more, and I wanted to have more issues of it. And I know if now, even if there's a Lobo run that comes out, it would not be as innovative as this comic was in 65.
Right. But to your point, it's good that we did those movies first and went back to this, because if we'd done it first, then I think Buck and the Preacher and Blazing Saddles would have been like, okay, we've already seen this before, but now doing it backwards, we can say, okay, we can go back 10 years, see where this idea was seated even before them, and see that trends. Because you're right, one of the downsides of this, because it is ultimately, it's a dense comic, but it is only a 36-page comic. There's one more after this, and so like it's cut off in its prime, whereas the other two things are full pieces of entertainment. So,
what are we doing next time? Is this it? Are we done with Speechless?
No, we're doing one more issue. We're doing the other existing issue that came out again September 1966, because Dell wanted to sell some more comics and need to finish out a print run. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if this is a sustainable thing, because to be fair, this is all origin story, but there's a really good origin story. So like, can they build on this? Will the next issue hold up? I don't know. I haven't read it yet. We'll see. So Chris, if people want to talk to you about Lobo, where would they find you?
You can come on to Blue Sky. I'm at darker_hue. You can jump into the Discord. I'll happily talk about Lobo because it gives me a chance to talk about Haunted West, which I love talking about. What about you?
You can find me at pugsteady.com. You can also find me, that's who I am on Blue Sky. Come on to the Darker Hue Discord. I would actually really like to talk about this comic. I've also been, as a result of this, slowly poking at other 50s and 40s comics. As a note, there are actually quite a number of people on Drive-Thru Comics who are remastering these older comics that fall in the public domain, so that they clean them up, look nicer. We read the original scans of them, but there also are, Lobo specifically has like $1. You can get both issues done as one big PDF that has nicely cleaned up, and there's been a bunch of other Western comics they've been starting to slowly, other companies have cleaned up. So like, I've been going for some of those, and it's been really, really interesting.
Awesome.
So with that, we'll talk to you next week.